Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I appreciate everything that the Arts Council in Westminster has done in raising the profile of the Qayqayt First Nation. As you know, we're a very small band and are without a land base at the moment. Hopefully that will change in the near future. On behalf of my ancestors, I raise my hands and welcome you all to the traditional territory of the Qayqayt First Nation. Qayqayt in our language means resting place, and we are often referred to as the river people. I would like to know. I'm here to answer questions, and I'm so happy because that means that you want to learn, that you want to listen, that you want to understand. And that's how we move forward with reconciliation and help with our healing process, because our people have suffered a lot over the last many, many decades. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief Larrabee. Thank you very much. For those who don't know me, my name is Charmaine Silva. I'm the news director at CityNews Vancouver. I'm also a proud New Westminster resident, and I also wanted to join Chief Larrabee in welcoming you to the Arts Council of New Westminster's annual general meeting. I did also want to acknowledge the Qayqayt First Nation and all Coast Salish peoples whose traditional unceded territory we're gathered on here today. And as a settler on these lands, I'm very grateful to be able to live, raise my family, and learn here. So thank you, Chief. And now, as we begin this fireside chat, and I was promised an actual fireside chat, so I'm glad that the Arts Council was able to deliver. But I think all of us are so grateful for you giving your time once again to answer our questions, to share your story. Your work preserving your Indigenous heritage is an inspiration to all of us. And your story, I know, which you shared with the Arts Council last year in an incredible moving video, talking about your journey and the history of the Qayqayt First Nation, is just an incredible piece of documentation that's out there now for people, all of us, to learn from. And so I hope folks who have not seen that video, I encourage everybody to go and watch that because it's incredible. But today we're hoping to build off of your generosity in sharing the story. And to start things off, I know that this year has been a very difficult year for Indigenous people across our country. There definitely is a shifting awareness of reconciliation, still amidst the colonial mindset, and the heartbreaking uncovering of the thousands of bodies on the sites of the former residential schools. Certainly has caused a lot of pain, reignited trauma, and I wanted to acknowledge what you must be feeling and what you must have been feeling throughout this year, particularly with the history of the Qayqayt First Nation. So I apologize for asking a difficult question to kick things off, but I think it's important. How has this year been for you, given the uncovering?
My mom, as a young girl, was sent to the residential school in Kamloops, and she remained there for 7 years. I believe my aunt and uncle were also there, but I don't know if you know, but when people have attended that school, or any residential school, they don't talk about it. The memories were too painful. And when I did find out from my mom that she was there, and then the discovery of the 215, I thought, what if some of those children were my mom's friends? And how did those children die? Was my mom a witness to some of that? Were they sick? Your mind just goes to so many different dark places. And then my children and grandchildren start phoning me and saying, Grandma, Mom, we could have been taken away. If your mom decided to go back or to stay on a reserve, they could have been taken away, and they were very upset. My granddaughter, who was 15 at the time, she's 16 now, she turned 16 recently. She was the most upset, crying and sobbing at me that she couldn't imagine being taken away from her mom and dad and her family. My nephew Johnny also felt the same thing, and a day or two after, he thought he would paint a portrait of what one of those children might have become had they lived. So in the end, he painted 215 children of what they might have been today. And the exhibit right now is at the museum in New Westminster at the Apple Center. And it's there for the next week. He's there today, he's there every day talking to people. The exhibit has been shown in Edmonton, and many people were telling him their stories of residential school. And it's heartbreaking. It's heart-wrenching. And yes, our family was grief-stricken. When I went to Kamloops, I went to the residential school and looked at the memorial site. I thought I was up there for 4 days. I thought I would visit it every day, but I couldn't. I went the first day, and I was so upset thinking about everything. My husband and I stayed for about an hour and a half. We were sitting on a bench out underneath the trees there, and I couldn't stop crying. So the next day, my husband said, would you like to go back today? And I said, I can't. It's just too emotional. So I brought with me today some things because in the earlier video, I couldn't show you things, but you're here and you can see. So I brought with me a little display board. So this is my great-grandmother, my mom's mom. This is my mom and my aunt. And they hitchhiked from Chilliwack to Vancouver when my mom got out of residential school. She's 17 here and here. And this is my mom and my uncle, and this is a few years later. And to hide that she was an Indigenous woman, she changed her appearance, she did her hair different, she put makeup on, she wore Canadian clothes, and people thought she was Asian. And that's how she lived the rest of her life. She never admitted to anyone that she was an Indigenous woman. And then all these other pictures just show some of the life before the settlers came. So I think I've answered your question.
You certainly have. Just to what you just mentioned there about your mother and her relationship with her identity because of the overwhelming systemic racism and discrimination, and your story, which you shared with us last year, and your discovery of your heritage and what that has impacted for your identity. Can you share with us a little bit more about that journey and that relationship with your mother and what she had to do and how that has impacted you? And you mentioned your children and your grandchildren.
Well, because my mom told me her story once and then asked me never to mention it again or talk to her about it or tell anyone, I wanted to know about the names that she gave me who were her parents, the names she gave me that were her grandparents. And because I promised her I wouldn't ever bother her again, because she obviously was so upset by me talking about it, when she passed away, I just thought that I couldn't bear it. Mom and I did everything together, and we were very close. I'm the only daughter. I have 3 brothers, and you know how men are. They don't share the same kind of things that mothers and daughters do, and we were very close. So I said to Dad, you know, I want to find out about my grandparents. I want to find out about everybody. And he said, you know, he said, your mom was so ashamed. You go out there and you make her proud. And so I just thought, well, I will just go to Chilliwack, I'll go to Musqueam, I'll go to Squamish Nation. And a lot of people knew my grandparents. A lot of people knew stories about them. And I felt a closer connection to Mom. And then a woman named Barb Weiss from Squamish Nation said, well, we know that your family was from New Westminster, so apply for your status card. So I went to Indian Affairs and they said, oh, there's nothing there. There's no home for you, so forget it. And then I thought, well, I'll fill out the form anyways. And so I did, because my mom's birth certificate said that she was born on the New Westminster Indian Reserve. I sent it in, and I guess it goes to Ottawa, and they sent it back, and they said, oh, congratulations, you are a registered Indian. You are now a registered Indian of the New Westminster Indian Band, number 566. And I thought, you know what? The people who were here had become extinct. And so I went to the Irving House, and I spoke to Archie Miller, and together we worked out looking up research and that, and then I think it was him who directed me to the Union of BC Indian Chiefs Resource Center. And the people there, they said, oh, we were hoping you'd walk in. We heard about you. And they came and they plugged a bunch of books on my desk there, and they said, okay. And they opened the book, you need to read this and this and this, and then I said, okay. I took out my notebook, I start writing, and Wendy comes back, she said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm writing the information. Oh, don't be silly, come with me. Takes me, and she photocopied all the pages. And so I went there every day for 5 months. I took a leave of absence from my job, and I went there every day for 5 months, and I collected 2.5 boxes of research about the Qayqayt people who lived here. And it was just amazing, an amazing journey. I found records of my grandfather and his fishing permits that he received because he was a fisherman for Annabelle Cannery, which is no longer. And I just gasped when I saw his name. And Wendy, the woman, came around, she said, what is it, what is it? And I was crying, and I said, that's my grandfather, and that's his fishing permit from 1920. And we were jumping up and down and crying and laughing and excited and happy. So it's been a long journey. My goal was to honor my mom. My goal was to make my mom proud of who she was. And now I think I was put on another path to make sure that the people who were residents here before the settlers came are not extinct anymore. And so It's been a big job.
Well, you've done an incredible job. You know, I can't say enough how inspiring it is, and for those of us settlers here now, given the context of everything that's happening, it's a real life, local example of the direct impact of colonization,
Yes.
of stolen children, of people ripped apart from their families and their land. And the fact that the Qayqayt First Nation was extinct and is now back is a testament to your work, that it's so connected, it's so interconnected with that history, that deeply painful history. It sounds like this has been, it's a mission now, but it sounds like it has been therapeutic for you as well.
The thing that gets me about people learning about residential school is that for so many decades, that our people's cries and the children's cries went unheard, that nobody heard. That now that people are aware, it's like an awakening of Canada and an awakening of the population, and it just still is unbelievable that it could have gone on for so many years. And so that part is still hard to come to terms with, like it's still part of our healing process. So we're getting there. We're getting there.
To that point, I think, I know there are a lot of people who have heard your story, have heard many other stories, want to learn, want to do things, and are trying to do the work. But out of all the things that people can do, in your mind, what is the most effective? What would you like to see folks do more of?
That's a tough question.
I get paid to ask tough
Give
questions.
us land? No.
Land.
Land. Give us a place that we can come together as a community again, like we were once. Our village used to be right below the woodland site. There were over 400 people there. A lot of them were Kwantlen, some Squamish, some Musqueam, and when Westminster was named the capital of the colony of BC, the mayor and council decided that they didn't want the First Nation people, that's not the term they used, in the city limits. And so Governor James Douglas created the Brownsville Reserve across the river, and 3 pieces of land where Kruger Paper now sits. And Poplar Island was later deemed as the quarantine place for the First Nations people who got smallpox, because they didn't want them in the city. And there's still unmarked graves on Poplar Island of some of our people who died there from smallpox. When smallpox vaccination came out, First Nations people were not allowed to get the vaccination, and that also hurt a lot of our people. So 400 of our community was decimated to less than half because of smallpox. The Royal Columbian Hospital was built at that time, and then the Sisters of Providence raised some funds and bought some property and opened St. Mary's Hospital, which is where a lot of our members were accepted, greeted, fed, whereas the Royal Columbian Hospital would not accept any persons of color there. And so St. Mary's Hospital meant a lot to us. My mom was born there. My grandfather died there. My great-grandparents, I believe, I can't find out what they died of, but they possibly could have died at St. Mary's Hospital. And so when they put the school there and named it Qayqayt Elementary, I was so happy because that site was a welcoming place for Indigenous people, for Chinese people, for any people of color. The Sisters of Providence fed them even if they were sick. And that's a testament to some good that came from that area and that era.
I know the history that you mentioned, it's complicated. And, you know, right now we're having conversations about the church and records and all of that stuff, and we're expecting, you know, the Pope to visit Canada in the coming years. The story you just shared, you know, paints one part of the story. So how do you navigate that very complicated history?
Well, I was speaking to a parishioner from one of the Catholic churches. I don't want to name which one, but I'm meeting with the priests and the parishioners. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but apparently they're not getting guidance from the oblates or the bishops or the archbishops or even from the Vatican on how to proceed with reconciliation. And so they want to talk to me and for themselves, for the community of New West, figure out what they can do to help the Indigenous people. And so I'll be meeting with them this week and have hopefully come up with a plan which may or may not work out. So regarding the Pope coming, I know that he has been invited to visit Kamloops and to visit the chief there. Whether he accepts and whether he goes, we don't know. Whether he will do a formal apology, we don't know. And it's just, it won't change anything, but it might ease some people's hearts. It just might ease some people's hearts if he did admit to the wrongdoing and the abuses that the church played a part in.
I want to shift gears a little bit and actually you touched on it a little bit when you mentioned smallpox and vaccinations, because, you know, we're now nearing the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that this health crisis is disproportionately impacting Indigenous people. But we also know the very complicated history around things like vaccinations, things like government programs, and the simple issue of trust. How is the Qayqayt First Nation navigating through that, and you yourself in terms of advocacy in the community?
I am pleased and proud to say that 99% of our members are vaccinated, double vaccinated, and I just got my booster shot on Wednesday. And the difference with our family is that we didn't grow up on the reserve. We grew up in a community. We worked, we bought houses, we bought apartments, you know. And so our life was totally different from someone who was raised on the reserve. However, my Aunt Margaret married a man from Musqueam, like in the 30s or 40s, and she had 9 children. and I keep in touch with some of my cousins who are my age, and they were taken away and put in foster care during the 60s scoop. And some of them have recovered. I mean, Musqueam is quite an urban reserve, and so they have, let me see, a lot of them who were foster children have now moved back to Musqueam, but they're still traumatized by what happened to them being taken away in the 60s scoop. And so when I went and talked to them at the very beginning in the 80s, and I said to my cousin Judy, well, your mom came from the US, as did my mom, because they were sisters, and this is what I'm planning on doing and how we're going to move forward with maybe talking to Indian Affairs and learning more about where we came from. And she phoned her family and said, Cousin Rhonda's here, Cousin Rhonda's here. And so all of a sudden, the house was filled with people, kids, teenagers, adults, and they were all excited and everything. And they thought I was doing a family tree. So the concept of government and, you know, different things, there was no concept of it for them. And I tried to explain to them and what I was hoping we could accomplish. And that, sure, it was going to take a long time, but hopefully in the end it would be worth it. And it was hard for them to understand because so afraid of the government, so afraid of, like they were amazed that I worked for the city of Vancouver. What? What do you mean you work for the city of Vancouver? So, different. Everything is different when you live on the reserve.
I think we're nearing the end of our chat, but I did want to ask you, how just your energy and your positivity in what you exude as you're sharing your story, despite the heartbreak and the pain. How do you do it?
Well, I have the support of my husband when I get down, when I get overwhelmed. I do get overwhelmed. When I get requests like this to talk, and it's more than one a week. If it's like 3 or 4 or 5, I get so overwhelmed and feel tired. And then as I read about, like I always research where I'm going, so I look up Arts Council of New Westminster and I read it. I look at who's there, who are the board members, trustees. I can't remember everyone's name, but I do try and find out about the organization. And once I do, I feel a little calmer. I'm not so overwhelmed. So if I just take each at a time, I'm okay. Just don't come at me like all at once. And we were lucky that the School District 40 provided us with an office at the New Westminster High School, secondary school. And we opened the office on November 15th. My daughter Stacy Ferguson is working there. And I invite all of you to go and bother her and ask her questions.
Your mom said so, right? Mom said so.
Mom said so, because she's in the Welcome Center and she's supposed to be welcoming the community and to answer any questions that you may have about anything. And so she thought she'd be pretty quiet. She said, oh, I don't know, maybe I should bring a coloring book or something. She's 50. Anyway, she's kind of a joker, and she tells things more direct than I do, very direct. And so I think you would enjoy speaking with her, because she will tell you the same things I do, but she'll tell you in a different way. And so please go and visit her at the Welcome Center in the West, secondary.
I'm going to take you up on that, so
Good.
Stacy's going to get a visit. But just a final thought to leave us with. You know, you've already given us so much, but if there's one thing you want everybody watching and everyone here to know, given the year that we have had, what would it be?
It would be for me to tell you how appreciative I am that you're listening. And I see someone has been taking notes, and that also makes me happy to think that she's going to read them later and say, okay, I get it now. That's all we ask, just get it. And I think that's what we're just striving for. As my daughter would say, just get it.
And getting it is harder for some people than others, but you know, as someone who for a living talks to people, I am hearing more people having these conversations, and so
Yes,
it's a
yes.
step.
The community of New Westminster is stepping up. The community in New Westminster is embracing reconciliation. And so, well, there is one thing. Mayor and Council have put up on their website their acknowledgement of the Halkomelem speaking people of New Westminster. And I strongly would like it to say, acknowledge the traditional unceded territory of the Qayqayt First Nation. And I don't know why they didn't. And so write to them and say, why didn't you mention Qayqayt? I mean, we've been coming out here for 30 years. I've been doing research for 40 or 50, and we belong here. Just because we don't have a land base doesn't mean we're not entrenched in this community, because we are.
Were you a part of the consultation or anything to do with that?
Yes, I was.
And they still left
And
it
they
off?
still didn't. They said, well. So it's disheartening, because mayor and council are supposedly the leaders of the city, right?
I don't want you to, you know, guess, but do you have any idea why this would be so difficult for them to do?
I think it's because we don't have a land base. I don't know. I've asked them why, and they say, well, you know, there were so many different nations here. And I said, well, yes, but they all left. And they all left to their own reserves. And so the people that stayed here were the people who were here. If my grandfather was born in 1880, that means that his parents were born like 1850 or whatever, and then their parents were born before that, which means that we never left. My grandmother was from Squaw Reserve in Chilliwack, so she was not from New Westminster, but she is buried in New Westminster. I mean, she's buried in her own home cemetery in Chilliwack. But my grandfather is buried at St. Peter's Cemetery, along with his parents and his uncle and some other Josephs who I don't know who they are because I can't find any records. But the First Nations custom is that when you pass away or cross over to the other side, you are buried where your homeland was. And so that happened to my grandmother when she passed away, and that happened to my grandfather when he passed away. So he's buried right here on Richmond and Cumberland in St. Peter's Cemetery, along with his parents.
Well, it sounds like you've given us a task. One of us has a newsroom, so we'll get on it. I want to thank you so much, Chief Larrabee, for your time and your generosity. Once again, very grateful for this. And thank you to all of you.